The world is changing. Your life is changing. My life is changing. And the things that we've learned to do in the past, that served us in the past, may not be serving us now. So if you find yourself in a position where you're losing the security of the job or of the career that you have had in your life, I'm going to invite you to embrace that experience as a gift and allow the experience to become your path to sharing something greater in the world. The reason is because every one of us comes into this world and we have skills, we have a knowledge, we have a talent of things that we are naturally good at, that you naturally enjoy. Maybe you don't have the degree. Ken does not have a degree in making a greenhouse, but he learned to do it. And he is thriving. Let me ask, I'm going to ask a question. In this room, is anyone in this room losing your job right now, or have you lost your job right now? Is your job changing? Anyone in the room? Wow. Okay. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for sharing that with me. I'm not surprised that it's happening because the world is changing so very quickly. In just a few minutes, I'm going to offer you the opportunity to go into your heart. Remember, the heart has its own intelligence. I'm going to invite you to go into your heart wisdom and ask the question, what can I offer? What can I give? What can I share with the world? And you might be surprised at what your heart says to you. We'll do this in just a few minutes. Okay, this is an example of why it's important to embrace the deep truths of who we are. Science is telling us that we are based in connection, that we are based in cooperation. And this is an example of why it's important. This is a form of resilience. This is another kind of resilience that allows us to thrive in the presence of a changing world by changing that question. Resilience, it's the key to thriving in life's extremes. All right. When we began this morning, I said I would talk about two kinds of resilience. I would focus on personal resilience because not many people do. I wanted to share the heart-based experiences with you, and we're not finished. We have one more this afternoon. But I also said I would talk briefly about social and community resilience, and that's what I'd like to do very briefly. I want to keep my promise. The founder of the organization Habitat for Humanity made this beautiful statement. He said, "For a community to be whole and healthy, it must be based upon people's love and concern for each other." I think there's a lot of truth to this. For a community to work, we must care about one another. What is a community? Different people have different ideas about what a community is. When we talk about community resilience, there are qualities that come up all the time. 5 key qualities. I will identify them quickly, and then I want to go into a specific example of a community that had to find a way to make things work because their world changed very quickly. We have a place in the world that is a living laboratory, an example. So we don't have to guess. We know exactly what it takes. The 5 qualities of community: we must have what is called spare capacity. We must have flexibility. We must have what is called safe failure, rapid rebound, and constant learning. So I'm identifying these now. Spare capacity is just what it says. We must have a way to take care of the things that are necessary even when services are not available. Flexibility. We've got to find a way to be flexible in all circumstances. Safe failure means that small portions of the community can stop working, but the big community continues. Rapid rebound is what resilience is all about. And the constant learning is so that we know what works and what doesn't. Okay, so I wanted to mention these. I won't spend, in the interest of time, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what I want to do is answer the question, what is community? Because community means different things to different people. A community can be one person. That's a community right there. That person is in community with himself, with the earth, with his body, and the world around him. A community can be a single family. That's a community. A community can be a couple of families that live close to one another like this. Maybe they get together once a week. That can be a community. A community can be a group of people that gather together for an important meeting once a month. That could be a community. A community can be Habitat for Humanity. They get together to build homes and help other people for periods of time, and then they're not together. That's a community. A community can be a few native ladies in Lake Titicaca in Peru that are exchanging the food they need for the week. That's a community. A community can be young people that have learned to care for themselves, as these young people have done. The young people care for themselves. The older young people care for the younger young people, and they have formed their own community. A community can be a city like Seoul, South Korea, with hundreds of thousands of millions of people working and living together. The point is that there are different kinds of community, and they fill different needs. Different kinds of community fill different needs. There's virtual communities. You can have a community on the internet, your Facebook community, your Twitter community. So the idea is connecting with people to fill different needs. The keys to a community is that every community must share a common vision, and every community must share a common bond. These are the two keys that hold a community together. I'm listening for the translation. Okay. Now, I want to share this quickly. We know how powerful a community could be because we have seen living examples in our recent past. When I was researching the book, the new book, The Turning Point, I had the opportunity to research some of these communities, and I'm going to share one with you now that for me was one of the most powerful to see. And maybe some of you are part of this community. Maybe some of you have family that is part of this community. It is the story of Cuba, the nation of Cuba after the Cold War, after the former Soviet Union collapsed. Are you Cuban? Are you from Cuba? Right here? Maybe. No? Okay. How many of you know the story of what happened to Cuba after the Cold War, after the former Soviet Union collapsed? It's a very, very potent story, very powerful. Cuba, during the Cold War years, relied heavily on the former Soviet Union for everything. Centralized trading, centralized imports of energy, of oil, of agriculture, food, textiles. The former Soviet Union was the main export trading partner. And when the former Soviet Union collapsed at the end of the Cold War, all of a sudden, boom, it stopped. And Cuba was left hanging with nothing. It was called, this time, after the Cold War, it is called the special period in time of peace. That's the name. The special period in time of peace. 80% of the agriculture and the energy markets collapsed almost overnight. 80%. There was no energy to run the power. The lights were out. The electricity was out. The heating was out. The cooling was out. There was no oil for the tractors to plow the fields, to create the harvest. There was no energy for transportation. It all stopped. There was a severe rationing of food. People began starving within weeks. People began starving. Listen to this. The Cuban people, the average calorie intake in 1989 was 3,052 calories a day. In 1993 was only 1,863 calories per day, almost a third. It dropped because the food was so scarce. Now, at the same time, look at what happened. People actually began to become healthier. Diabetes declined. Heart disease declined. Stroke declined during this period. And the doctors are saying, why? It was such a difficult time. Why did people become healthier in the difficult time? This is where it gets very interesting. It was a difficult time for Cuba, but the people actually became healthier. Here is the reason why. Community was the answer. When they had nothing, they began to form communities based upon what they did need. They needed food. They needed water. They needed medical attention. And all of a sudden, the communities went into the cities and they tore out the old buildings and the vacant lots, and they began to build gardens. They began to build gardens so they could grow their own food. And the food that they were growing was much healthier than what they had been eating before all of the trade collapsed. These are community gardens that began, and suddenly people began to care for themselves. The key is that they decentralized the things that were important to their lives. Decentralized, became local. Local energy, local food, local medicine, and this is how the people of Cuba survived during a difficult crisis. This was a form of community resilience. The key in this resilience is decentralization. Everywhere you looked in Cuba, suddenly people were growing food and their bodies were healthier because of this. Now, today, these gardens continue, even though Cuba has trade now with other nations, some other nations. People have continued localized living because it is resilient to change. Resilient to change. And that is the key. They have continued local production. It is non-GMO. It is organic. It is reliable. It is safe. It is inexpensive. And everyone contributes. That is the power of community. So community resilience, the key is to localize, live locally. And I know many of you do that now. If you live in Italy, other parts of Europe do it more than America. America is learning about this right now. America is learning a very powerful lesson in localized living. Asia is learning about localized living. But this worked so well. This has worked so well in Cuba that the new national slogan, the national motto that you see on the signs, it was such a difficult time in Cuba for so long. But the resilience in localized living changed everything. And the new motto, now, if you read Spanish, you know what it is. Do you know what that says? Better world is possible. A better world is possible. So we can all learn a lot. Cuba went through a very difficult time, and they learned about community, they learned about resilience, they learned about localized living, and it has changed their lives. The world changed, and they had to change. Our world is changing, and we are now learning about resilience. We're learning about personal resilience. We're learning about community resilience. The key here is localized living. Localized food, localized energy, localized services, localized economy, localized finances. This is the key that helps us to be resilient in times of change. So where you have the opportunity to create this in your community, you will be a stronger community, and you will be resilient to many of the big changes to the degree that you can embrace these lessons. So I'm not going to say a lot more about this. I promised I would mention it. I talk about community much more in the new book. In the new book, I give a blueprint for how to make community, how to actually build the community on very specific ideas. This is what I wanted to say to you about these today. Localized living makes us more resilient to life's extremes. Does that make sense? Are you good with that? Okay. I know, that's okay, we're not finished yet. So I know that we're covering a tremendous amount of information today. My promise to you this morning was that we would talk about the conditions of the world in a way that was honest, truthful, factual, because how can we thrive in the change unless we are honest about the change? So we are living this time of extremes, and the extremes have led to a new normal. And that new normal is with us for this lifetime, probably for our children's lifetime. Now, I want to be very clear about this. I'm an optimist, and I have never been more optimistic about our world than I am right now. I've never been more optimistic about your nation, about my nation, about our global community than I am right now. And the reason I am optimistic is because we are the generation that has discovered what works and what does not work. We know, this generation, we know that war is not going to solve our problems. And I believe that you are witnessing the first generation. I believe that we will be the first generation that walks away from war as a means to solve our problems. I think we will come close to some wars. I don't think we will see the wars because we're learning that war is becoming obsolete. This generation is about to turn its back on war and walk away from the use of war to solve problems. That's where we are right now.